Hello and welcome to True Audio Files. Today, as you've seen in the description, I'm going to talk about the Black Album by Metallica and do a sound quality shootout. A couple of reasons why I'm doing this. The first one, and probably the most obvious and most important one, is because last week they reissued and had a remastered version of the Black Album come out, and basically had several different variations of it. The biggest one being the Super Deluxe box set that I'll be showing you today. So that's one of the biggest reasons. But the second reason is I kind of wanted to talk about the remasters of the Metallica catalog in comparison to the earlier original issues of them. So I think it's very important because they're all pretty similar in terms of how they compare. You know, all of the previous versions that have been remastered compared to their counterparts from earlier in the early and first pressings of them. So anyways, for this sound quality shootout, I am going to use the 45 RPM version of the Black Album that came out in 2008. This was cut by Bernie Grundman, and it's on 4 records. And it's 45 RPM, as I believe I mentioned. And I think by many, or most, that's considered the best sounding record copy of the Black Album. If you know of a better version of it, please let me know. But besides potentially the new remaster, and we'll go over that. But previous to the remasters, to my knowledge, that's kind of considered the best sounding version of the Black Album. So then there is the behemoth of a box set, the Black Album box set here, as you could see it. Kind of a cool binding front binding on the binding area where it would be most prominent. Also, they're all numbered. I don't know if you could see what number it is. I don't even remember. It's in the 3000s out of, I think, like 50,000 or something like that. But this is probably, I think, the Metallica box sets, I kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. I think they do an amazing job of just throwing a bunch of stuff at you in them. And I'll show you what I'm talking about on that. They're very pricey, though. But, you know, they give you a ton and a ton of stuff. The drawbacks that I've seen, and I'll go into a couple of them more in detail, but the biggest one for me is they don't always give you everything that was available during the time period. For example, when they did the Kill 'Em All box set, which is their first album, there, again, bunch of stuff. They had a bunch of great unreleased photos in the book, which I can kind of show you a little bit of the book here. And they gave you a bunch of like concerts and, you know, unreleased demos and rough tracks and stuff like that. But there was a demo tape that they did, something like No Life Until Leather or something like that, that actually had Dave Mustaine on vocals and guitar, and they didn't put that in the box set. And they also didn't put an EP into that box set that came out around that time called Whiplash. And I think it was mainly live stuff, but regardless of what it was, I was kind of disappointed that they didn't release that as part of that box set. And there's some similar stuff in this, which I'll go over. Not similar, but there are some issues that they didn't release some stuff that should have been in this box set too. But I'll go over what comes with it. So it comes with what are 6 records, but it's really only basically the album proper, which is on 2 records. And it has a picture disc, which is an EP. There's basically Sad But True and a couple of bone stuff. A 3-song EP from their performance at Wembley Arena for the tribute to Freddie Mercury. And then a live album from Russia, which is a 2-record set. So you're essentially got 2 albums, which are 2 record sets, and 2 EPs on 6 records. So not as much material as you would think in a 6-record part set, if you will. There's this folder that it comes with, which is kind of cool. And what the folder includes, well, it didn't include, but I put into it, are some album cover, magazine cover reprints that they've done, which, in my opinion, weren't done all that well. And also the thing that is kind of cool, but kind of a, it's nice to have, but not a need to have. But that's a lot of these box sets, right? But it's basically, reissues of the original lyrics written down by James Hetfield and I think it was just James. But it's kind of cool, and it's recreated on what looked to be like these yellow legal pads, which I think is what he was using back then to write his lyrics on. So that's kind of a cool little extra that it comes with. And then the other extra, which is nice, I really haven't had a lot of a chance to go through it. Kind of flimsy, unfortunately, but it's a hardcover book that basically has some essays in it and has a bunch of photos, lots and lots of writing, but maybe some not as often seen photos of them and things on that nature from that time period. So that's kind of cool. But the biggest thing that makes this box set that worth its money that they're charging for you, in my opinion, is the discs. There are, I think it's 15 or 16 CDs. Here's just some of them. 15 or 16 CDs of like alternate takes, rough demos, riff tapes, live albums, interviews, that kind of stuff. On 16, I think it's, like I said, 15 or 16 CDs, and then 6 DVDs. And the DVDs have things like live shows, and also they have some making of the videos, the music videos themselves, things on that nature. And then they kind of give you a couple of tchotchke things as well, which I have not opened some of them, but there's basically laminates from their tour passes, some guitar picks, and then they also give you a Metallica lanyard, which you can put your passes on, I suppose, and, but that's the set. And they also give you a download code for all the CDs. The one thing they do not do, unfortunately, which is, as any of you who've watched any of my videos know, one of the big things they didn't do, which really frustrates me, is they basically gave just MP3 versions, not lossless downloads of the music, which kind of upsets me, because I know it's available, because you can buy it separately for like, $160 or more. But, you pay over $200 for a box set. You would hope that they would include those downloads that you can get, because they are available. But anyways, I'm not going to go on that rant again, but that is the drawback, one of the drawbacks to this box set. The other drawback to this is back in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, there was a DVD audio disc that actually had a surround sound mix of the Black Album on it. And that is not included in this, which I just can't understand. They've got 6 DVDs on here, and not one of them has the surround sound mix that is out there. And luckily I already have it, but maybe for those who weren't fortunate enough to grab it when it was available, they should have made it available to everybody. And it's unfortunately, it's kind of sad that they didn't include that. So rants are now over. So I've had a chance to listen to all the records, and for overall, they sound great. They were actually I think they were all cut by Chris Bellman at Bernie Grundman Studios. The Black Album itself, the album proper, was actually remastered by Bob Ludwig, which sounds like that would be good. So there's some heavy hitters in there, some top-of-the-line audiophile level people involved in making the box set and making the records, especially too. But how do they fare out? Let's go over that a little bit. So I put the remastered album on, and it's pressed really well. I believe it's pressed at Furnace, which is basically Palace, the U.S. Palace pressing plant. And, it's pretty quiet. I'm not sure if I'd go quite as far as saying audiophile quiet, but it's pretty quiet. And the sound quality, EQ, from an EQ perspective, the album sounded great. I think Chris Bellman did a great job cutting what he was given. And, you know, all the way through, it sounded great. I don't believe there was any sibilance. If there was any, I don't remember any of it that stands out to me. But you know, the album proper sounded great, and all the live and demo stuff sounded great, and the picture disc sounded as good as it can be. It was still obviously noisy, like all picture discs are, but not as bad as some of the stuff that I've heard on picture discs. So overall, I was pleased with the overall sound quality of all the records that were made. Then what I did is went back and played at least the first 3 tracks on the remaster and compared those to the 45 RPM. And they both have a very similar EQ. The biggest difference is the difference that I was expecting to hear, because I've heard it on all the previous box set remasters that were done, and they all kind of have that same thing going from them. They all sound pretty good, until you compare them to the previous versions that were considered the best sounding versions, and then not so much. And that's the case here too. The 45 RPM, EQ wise, sounded very similar, but the soundstage, which was much deeper, had a better, I shouldn't say much, it was much deeper on Enter Sandman. On the other tracks I tested out, it wasn't much deeper, but it was a little deeper. But you kind of had a more of a 3D effect soundstage wise. You know, there's, for lack of a better term, more air around every instrument and vocal. And the one thing that really stood out, especially on, I think it was Holier Than Thou, when I was doing the comparisons, is the cymbals really stood out on the 45 RPM as sounding more natural, more realistic, less like a tin can, if you will, in comparison to the remaster. And I don't think it has anything to do with Chris Bellman, and I don't think it has anything to do with Bob Ludwig either. I think he was tasked with an assignment, and he did exactly what they wanted him to do, which I'm sure was to dynamically compress it a little bit more, which makes the soundstage less shallow, less 3D sounding. Not that this, I think, had any role in it, but I'm pretty sure that it was probably cut from, you know, a high resolution digital file. But again, I don't think that has much of it to do with it. But I mean, overall, like I said, the EQ sounded great. Soundstage was not as good, but it's still decent. But it did have kind of a flatter sound to it, visual, you know, when you're listening to it and closing your eyes and listening, and just didn't have that enveloping soundstage like you did on the 45 RPM. And also but the soundstage width on both were pretty similar. So that was one thing that you can't take away from it, because which tells me it's definitely not, you know, how it was cut or how it was mastered. It was just in the respect of the quality of the job done remastering. It has more to do with what they wanted done with the remastering, which was dynamically compress it. So that's kind of my take. I would say, you know, if you don't want to spend the extra big money on the best sounding versions of the early albums, and the earlier albums to me are the best albums. I think the Black Album was their last great album, and they made a couple of good ones after that. I'd say, again, if you don't want to spend $100 or more, then these reissues are actually pretty good if you're willing to sacrifice some soundstage, because from an EQ standpoint, they sound good, and I think they're all pressed really well. Of the ones I've heard, they were. So they're going to be a good value. Let's put it that way, you know, because they're probably, you know, $25-$30 or something like that. Maybe a little bit more for the, you know, Walmart variants that are a different color or whatever. But, you know, compare that to $100 or $100 plus for a lot of the reissue or the originals or early pressings that are going to be, you know, $80 to $100 and up. It's definitely going to be a much better value. And, you know, if that sound stage is not something that's important to you, it's something you should go for. In terms of the CDs and DVD content, I haven't been able to go through all of it yet, because, like I said, there's 15 or 16 CDs, and they're all almost completely filled up. I mean, they're all over an hour long a piece, every single one of the CDs. And then, you know, I've went through, you know, maybe half of the DVDs so far, and, you know, there's some great content. You get to see all the videos, some of the making of the audio and things like that. So that stuff was kind of cool. And there's some Ross Halflin, I think. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his last name right, or in saying his name correctly. But he's a really popular heavy metal photographer. He basically photographs all the popular heavy metal acts or did, and I think he still does. But there's some home videos that he made that are part of the DVDs, and there's a lot of cool little extra stuff on there. So you're definitely going to get the bang for your buck on the box set. I know it's over $200, but considering there are at least 22 discs and 6 records and some tchotchkes, I would say you're definitely getting, you're kind of your bang for your buck, especially in comparison to the newly announced Kiss Destroyer box set, which is coming out. I think it's the 45th anniversary of it. Basically, I think it's either 4 or 5. I think it's 4 CDs and a Blu-ray, and it's $200. So, comparison, this is a much better value. So, anyways, that's my take on this, and I would love to hear what your thoughts are, especially about the box set itself. Also about what your take is on the different masterings of this album and other Metallica albums. See what your thoughts are on these, if you've compared the new remasters to some of the earlier or first pressings of the Metallica albums, and get your thoughts and takes on it. So that's everything I've got today. Please subscribe, like the channel, hit that alert bell, check out my social media pages, and you have yourself an awesome rest of the day.